Aspen media briefing today. Today we will be announcing a non-binding term sheet between Aspen and Johnson & Johnson for the manufacturing and sale of an Aspen branded COVID-19 vaccine for the African continent. This is indeed a monumental and groundbreaking development. It's groundbreaking for the African continent, its healthcare systems, media briefing. The intention is that the briefing lasts an hour, so we should have you done by 4:30. We will allow approximately 30 minutes, as you can see according to the program, for remarks from our distinguished panelists, and thereafter we will be opening up for a Q&A session. I'd like to right at the outset encourage you to start posting your esteemed panelists today, starting with firstly Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala needs no introduction. She's the Director General of the World Trade Organization. All these colleagues that I introduced have been pivotal partners in getting us to the point where we've arrived today. Also gives me great pleasure to John Nkegasong, who is the Director for the African Center for Disease Control and Prevention, followed by Mr. Strive Masiyiwa, who is the African Union Special Envoy for COVID, as appointed at the time by President Ramaphosa in his capacity as AU Chairman. Strive is also the head and is also the Deputy Lead of ABAT. Next up is Dr. Adrian Thomas. Dr. Thomas is Vice President for Strategy and External Affairs, Global Public Health for Aspen's partner, in this instance, Johnson & Johnson. For making yourselves available. As I indicated, we would not have arrived at this point if and were it not for all your interventions along the way. So I'm going to call on firstly Dr. Adrian Thomas, to give some remarks from Johnson & Johnson. But Adrian, before you go, I should note one very important apology, and that is from President Cyril Ramaphosa, contributed by way of a statement which finds its way in the press release that has been sent to all our colleagues in the media. So Adrian, may I invite you to offer some comments on behalf of Johnson & Johnson.
Thanks very much, Stavros, and it's a privilege to be here and offer some comments from Johnson & Johnson. Before I do so, I want to recognize the leadership that has resulted in this milestone, this incredible modernization, and other multilaterals, but also yourself, Stavros, and Dr. Saad for being there as our partners, not just in this current episode of the pandemic, but also as trusted partners in manufacturing in Africa with Johnson & Johnson in the past. Today is a really important day, both in the fight against COVID-19, but also for the future of African health. You know, we recognize that today we're moving closer towards enabling not just contract manufacturing of a vaccine within Africa, but also expanding that. And this comes at a crucial moment. I'm a physician, and Africa's COVID-19 vaccination rates are significantly lower compared to those seen in high-income countries, and we need to do something differently. Quite simply, without widespread vaccination and access to vaccines, this pandemic will not come to an equitable end. Johnson & Johnson has long been committed to partners in manufacturing a vaccine. Now we're pleased to reach an advanced stage of discussions that are finalized, and we hope that will be quickly, would grant Aspen a license to produce an Aspen-branded African COVID-19 vaccine using drug substance provided by Johnson & Johnson as the first step. A final agreement between our companies would mark an important step towards increasing the capacity and expertise of vaccine manufacturing across the African continent in that specialized vaccine manufacturing infrastructure, which has to include skilled local workforce needed to rise to this challenge. At Johnson & Johnson, we're committed to supporting this future, and we're delivering on our commitment to make available 900 million doses of our COVID-19 vaccine to the African Union and COVAX facility towards that future. Only by working together can we bring together the necessary skills, expertise, and resources to support the vaccination of people who are in most need at this critical stage of the pandemic. I thank you all for your time. I look forward to the discussion, and we're proud to be part of this important milestone in manufacturing in Africa. So thank you very much.
Dr. I would now like to invite Dr. Ngozi, of course, our WTO Director General, comes from Africa. I'd like to invite her to offer some remarks. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much, Stavros, and greetings from Geneva. Let me start by congratulating Dr. Stephen Saad and Tshisekedi, in fact, all the African presidents, for their really strong leadership on the issue of vaccine production and vaccine equity. It is with delight I congratulate my brothers, Dr. Nkenga Song, Mr. Strive Masiwa, Dr. Benedict Orama, and the sister who is not here, Dr. Vera Songwe, for their work on the AVAT platform, as well as on the vaccine manufacturing to a timely conclusion. Our periodic meetings with vaccine CEOs have provided a forum where we can all work jointly to solve problems of vaccine production, distribution, and equity of access. Vaccine manufacturers have been able to exchange with each other. It is my sincere hope that this license agreement will represent another step on the way to. As of last week now, nearly 7.8 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines have been administered worldwide. 2.9 billion doses have been traded across borders by mid-November. These numbers are remarkable when we think that a year ago, only a few million doses had been administered, and practically none were being traded. Production capacity has grown to available doses have been procured by 5 countries or economies, and 1/3 of doses are stockpiled, waiting to be used. The emergence of the new variant Omicron, which forced us to postpone our ministerial conference scheduled for this week, is another sign that we need to ramp up our work to foster vaccine equity. Only about 3% of people in low-income countries are fully vaccinated. The greater the risk that new viral mutations will arise and threaten people's lives and risk global economic recovery. This is also one of the reasons why we must quickly conclude the discussions on technology transfer and intellectual property waivers at the WTO, so as to come to a pragmatic solution. Trade and cross-border supply chains remain essential to manufacture and access. Many of the information tools we have been able to develop involved constructive collaboration with the private sector, as well as with WTO members and other stakeholders. We value these partnerships and the trust that they represent. South Africa is one of the 10 countries around the world producing and exporting COVID-19 vaccines. Before the pandemic, 80% given that these vaccines are new, and in many cases, so are the production facilities, like the one expansion being contemplated by Aspen. But the concentration underscores how much work we have to do to achieve a global vaccine manufacturing base that is sufficiently diversified as to be able to handle multiple simultaneous national crises in a future pandemic. We will continue to work towards supporting equitable access to vaccines. Multi-stakeholder collaboration is essential to achieve this objective. Together with the heads of the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the World Health Organization, we are working in the framework of the Multilateral Leaders Task Force to accelerate the delivery of COVID-19 vaccines diagnostics and therapeutics to low and middle income countries, and continues negotiations on a response to the pandemic, including IP issues. I hope that this license agreement will be fruitful for Africa and serve as one of the examples of how voluntary licensing can help solve technology transfer problems and save lives. Congratulations to Aspen, congratulations to J&J and to all the teams who worked so hard to make this possible.
During this pandemic, and in particular, your energy around solving a problem is certainly something that inspired all of us and was important in getting us to this point. You've used your convening power extremely constructively to bridge the gap between health, who hails from Gaborone, just north of our borders. She is, as I said, representing the World Health Organization. Over to you, Dr. Moeti.
Thank you. So thank you very much. First of all, it's such a great pleasure for me to be part of this occasion of the announcement of the JN, the scenes to make this happen. A huge congratulations, of course, to the two main entities concerned on this, and acknowledgement of the leadership of President Cyril Ramaphosa and indeed all the African leaders for the determined way in which they've responded and taken action around this pandemic. And I say that as somebody who has worked for this decision, particularly J&J and Aspen. Congratulations for making us all very excited at this extremely challenging time for the whole world and particularly for Africa. What is happening today is going to make a significant contribution to transforming production of vaccines and essential health tools in Africa. I'm quite convinced, and we were happy of it. As we are speaking now, the world's ministers of health are meeting, some in person and some virtually, in Geneva in a special session of the World Health Assembly, considering the establishment of a development of a global instrument for better convergence of member states' collective action on pandemic preparedness, including diversifying the manufacture of therapeutics, vaccine minds of these leaders in health, on the urgent need to accelerate COVID-19 vaccine availability and uptake and diversify the manufacturing of these vaccines in places regardless of the economics. The speed and the transparent ways in which South African scientists and scientists from my own country, Botswana, and the governments made the global community aware of the emergence of the variants was commended, quoting the political leaders. It is absolutely important that we work together to reduce the extreme vulnerabilities of the supply chain on our continent, which relies on imports to meet between 70 and sometimes 100% of our demands for medicines, vaccines, and other health projects. Today's event is proof of how collaboration and smart partnerships can congratulate, as I said before, both Aspen and J&J for signing this really milestone agreement. It's a very important step towards a reality in which Africa manufactures quality COVID-19 and other vaccines for its own populations. And from the regional office in Africa, we will continue to provide support and to advocate for boosting of local manufacturing of medical products, including vaccines. We see and will be a partner accompanying the countries all the way as you roll out this vaccine. Thank you.
Dr. Moeti, thank you very much for those insights. And in particular, thank you for your leadership on the continent and also for being very often the conscience of the continent. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, Dr. John Nkeda Song is not able to dial in at this point in time. We will try and get him on. But in the interest of time, let me invite Professor Arama to provide us with his remarks. Professor, over to you.
In congratulating Aspen Pharma and Johnson & Johnson for this milestone. It paves the way for Africa to begin to take control of its health security. It provides the opportunity to chart our own course or how to deal with the pandemic rather than relying on others. It provides a platform for us. Government will not come because we wish. It will not come because we beg others to give it to us. It comes because we work towards it and because we demand it. We thank Aspen Pharma for its excellent manufacturing facility that helped make the case. We thank His Excellency very, very hard to ensure that there's a broad access to intellectual property with regard to the COVID-19 vaccines and other therapeutics. We say also a big thank you. With the negotiating skills of Mr. Pasiva, certainly helps to bring today's event to what we're celebrating. And of course, our other colleagues. So today, we also celebrate an important thing, that going forward, that we can tell those who want to donate vaccines to Africa that they can kill two birds with one stone. Donate vaccines and create employment on the continent by donating African vaccines. Before, we couldn't say that. So we thank Aspen, find ourselves the pandemic as an agent for development. For us at our Federal Bank also, we have facilities dedicated to supporting those who want to manufacture vaccines and other pharmaceuticals to acquire intellectual property. We can finance the license fees, we provide the assurance, the guarantees, and hope that this event will now mark the turnaround Africa needs as we move forward post the pandemic. Thank you.
Professor, thanks very much indeed to you as well. And the dual role that you played first, they say behind every force is the support, and you have provided that support to Strive. So thank you very much for your contribution as well. Colleagues, Dr. John Mkedasong is not going to join us regrettably. So he does, I have just spoken to him, he sends his apologies and means for the continent. So with that, may I invite Mr. Strive Masiyiwa, who is the African Union Special Envoy for COVID and also the head of AVAT, to give us some of his comments. Thank you, Strive, over to you.
Thank you so much, colleagues, for those. One, allow me, I would like to give a bit of history to how we got to this momentous occasion today. It's almost a year to the day when President Ramaphosa chaired a meeting of the Bureau of Presidents, at which we were directed to create these vaccines, not to mobilize donations, but to go out and purchase at least 50% of the target set by the leaders. That 50% is 450 million people in Africa. Our expectation has always been that the other 50% would come through the COVAX facility. As soon as the task force was set up, we immediately began to engage the global suppliers whose vaccines were showing the most progress. You all know who the big vaccine suppliers were. And after meeting with the suppliers, those vaccines, and purchased all the production capacity that was available from the key vaccine manufacturers. When we reported back the challenge we were facing to President Ramaphosa, I really specifically remember that he said to me, "Are you aware of this agreement between John?" He's the CEO and co-founder of Johnson & Johnson. And immediately the president's office set up the meeting between myself, Stephen Saad, and members of AVAT. And we were absolutely surprised to find that we had a company that said, yeah, we have the capacity to produce vaccines. And we are already contracted to produce 250 million for Johnson & Johnson. We reported back to the president, who said, okay, I want to meet with the Johnson & Johnson management team. And you all know the history. Johnson & Johnson had already committed some production. So that agreement was reached at the end of March. But as I've said often, that agreement would not have been possible without Afri-Exim Bank, because the African Union does not have a balance sheet. We don't have money at the African Union. We have to go out and raise the money. And they had to have a special meeting at which they increased the capital of the bank so that it could provide an immediate guarantee, as well as pay all the deposits that were required. Otherwise, we would not have been able to collect all the money from the different countries and then go. It's Stephen Saad and Aspen on one side, an African company stepping forward, and the role of Afri-Exim Bank, an African bank. So we were able to secure the advance purchase agreement so that production could start at Aspen, even before a single African bank, such as Nigeria, Egypt, Zimbabwe, and many other countries that met in an urgent session to make this money available for Africa to get the vaccines. So once the agreement was signed, payments made, we then turned to discussing with Johnson & Johnson and Aspen. What became clear to us was that the arrangement of a contract supplier was not as flexible as a licensee. So President Ramaphosa licensing Johnson and Aspen to produce this vaccine as an African vaccine with end-to-end all the way to substance manufacture. It's a historic thing for which I will always be so grateful, because I was able to be there and to listen to President Ramaphosa, because we consider Aspen capable of producing the vaccine. So began the negotiations. We said in the meeting, look, you are companies, you do the negotiations between you. We don't want to be involved in your terms and your commercial terms and agreement to be produced now as a licensed product, which means when we want to talk about purchasing vaccines, we go to Aspen. We don't go to Johnson & Johnson, which is a major, it gives us the flexibility, it gives us the, one of the key things that we have called for, which is security of supply, just like they do in India, has begun. And so it behoves on me to also now call on people like Gavi, who are major buyers, to say it is now time that when it comes to the purchase of vaccines, you come to Africa first. Because unless people like Gavi step forward, this problem was those with production assets are the ones who currently control the supply of vaccines. So we today have taken a major step forward. I urge Aspen and Johnson & Johnson to complete the commitment, which is that it must include substance production within the next 2 years. I'm pleased that the production level that they promised us has also been increased from the 250 million to 400 million per year, which is important, particularly as we move into boosters. Let me conclude by saying the contract between Johnson & Johnson and the AVAT forward. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Strav, thank you very much. Again, it's always of great inspiration listening to you. As you said, there are many historical chapters to this journey. And I suspect when the story gets written, you will feature in every single one of those chapters. And you've done this for the betterment of Africa and for humanity. So we owe you a significant debt of gratitude, both for your leadership and also what you have done for this continent in its time of need. Thank you very much, Strav. Ladies and gentlemen, may I lastly call upon the Aspen Group Chief Executive.
I need to start also by just thanking everybody who's been a part of this. I mean, the J&J team, when trusting us and demonstrate and giving us an opportunity to demonstrate, which was critical because I heard this so many times, but to demonstrate that we've got world-class capabilities and they exist in Africa. To that end, I've got to thank Dr. Paul Stoffels, who led the J&J team into Africa, together with Jacques Peters and Adrian on the screen as well, who've been incredibly supportive together with the day. You know, Dr. Ngozi, I was trying to work out while you were talking how many of these webinars I've been on with you and the teams. I think I'm in double digits now, and that's just the absolute commitment that you've had. And thank you for your leadership in getting all the private sector and public sector together and making it a discussion and a team to work together, and we didn't point fingers at each other. And it's certainly, we've seen reallocation of vaccines and many very important, we really have demanded that our continent is not ignored. I mean, Strav does have a day job. He's got a pretty serious day job. He's a very, very serious job, and he wasn't letting it stay down. So Strav, I've got to tell you, you really galvanized us all. And I think for all of us panelists on here, African panelists, you really gave us pride in our continent and what can be done and in a decisive way. We've had key role players out of the African Union. Many of you have mentioned our President Cyril Ramaphosa, who headed the local manufacturer and given us support in South Africa. Of course, it's a pity not to have Dr. John from the CDC here. He led the continent's fight against this pandemic. Prof. Benedict and Strav at AVAT. What can we say about AVAT? This team really assembled their own financing, ready to get a seat at the table without a begging bowl. And that just made us just feel like we've all just taken a step up in Africa. They showed behind them that they've put together solutions and demanded a seat at the table. Of course, I must stress our real heroes are the Aspen and the J&J factory teams, who collectively have and are delivering millions of vaccines every week. I was happy to hear Strive, you know, that you continue to getting these vaccines and you're calling for countries to take them from you. We really have progressed from where we were in the initial stages. And these vaccines are for our continent. And really, it's the fault line really are those with capacity versus those without capacity. In Africa, we import 99% of our vaccines, and exposure to this risk was no more starkly demonstrated post the suspension of exports from India. And that was probably one of the single biggest reasons for our delay in getting access in Africa. The solution to this has to be regional capacitation. I think we've been enough with Dr. Ngozi, enough on WTO, and I think we've all come to the same conclusion. If Aspen was not in Africa, would any of these doses have gone to the continent? I think not, with respect. More follow-up booster doses have been administered globally than vaccines across Africa. We really are grateful for the support we have received from J&J. It's been unstinting with technical teams here, and it's really given us the confidence as Aspen to boost our capacities from 300 to over 400 next year, and by the end of next year. And to this end, the multilateral procurement, we have been proactively engaging us, and they've seen the risk of having concentrated supply, which Dr. Ngozi discussed earlier. And they've expressed a commitment to helping support regional procurement. And I think this will be very important. The license from J&J, as Dr. John said, it is a game changer. You know, African vaccine gives you independence, and it gives you speed of access to IP. It obviates for those hurdles related to IP. And also because it's a tech transfer, it's a more efficient process for early entry. You know, as with pioneering solutions found for voluntary licenses over a decade ago in ARVs, for ARVs, and sort of probably gives away how long we've been here for, but we hope that this vaccine license and the related tech transfer may serve as a blueprint to really assist capacitate both Africa. So, thank you.
Stephen, thanks very much for that. And in particular, thanks for your bold and decisive leadership, Stephen, your vision on the continent. The continent would not be in that position without your bold and visionary leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, I am acutely aware when the speakers gave their various inputs. So I'm going to direct some of the outstanding questions as they came along. Can I start off with Dr. Thomas first? Adrian, would you like to comment on whether you see a drop in efficacy as Moderna allegedly stated today with respect to the Omicron variant?
Science, you know, the pandemic is evolving, variants are evolving. But the number one thing we know is, you know, the best way to prevent transmission and evolution of resistance, the emergence of new variants, is to vaccinate. So let's focus on vaccinating people. The second thing is, we've seen that, at least for historic variants, that the vaccines are provided, as I know many of our colleagues in the industry, we're already working on tweaking the vaccine if necessary to cover the latest variant. We should not get ahead of that. I think the other thing I wanted to mention is there's this concept of rapid vaccination, and I want to cover it not just because we want to protect people, but to protect from transmission. Those are you know, a couple of the comments I'd make. What was the other question that you had, Steph?
The 900 million doses.
Yeah, we committed early on to 500 million doses through COVAX, up to 400 million through the Africa Union. We remain committed to that from any source. You know, I want to point out that it's a very difficult assistance of partners like yourselves and Aspen, but also with the assistance of the Africa Union, the CDC, Afrexim Bank, WHO, UNICEF, Gavi, COVAX, and other governments we're trying to solve. And so we have to keep our eye on the ball, which is we've got to get through the acute 12 to 24 months of vaccinating people. If we need, you have a very, very large healthcare worker study, almost 400,000 people in South Africa, and we've just started working with them on boosting after 8 to 12 months. And that cohort, almost 500,000 people, is going to provide incredible evidence about real-world effectiveness. And so we expect some more information on that in the next, 3 or so months.
Drug substance. And then Steve, no surprise, Alex come with a whole lot of questions around EBITDAs and profit per vial and profit per dose. So can you speak a little around the economics, if you can, and also a question around CapEx? Sorry, and Steve, I'm going to ask you to comment on one other thing, which is
agreed the key critical points. And so all of those areas, whether it's substance pricing or commercial terms, legal liability, we've now in a position where all of these matters have been fleshed out, and we have these in our non-binding term sheet, and will now be fleshed out. So I think we've tried to deal with anything that could be a crinkle up front. In terms of the commercial realities of this to be competitive with current pricing trends, we don't really want to ask for any favors, and to the extent we can be more competitive, we will be. Our current focus at the moment is to register Aspanovax with authorities, SAPRA, World Health Organization. We've got a lot of work to do there. We also want to focus on accrediting. We've got the other line coming on, so to increase our capacities to over 400 million. And we really want to try and bring that line on as soon as possible. To the extent we have high profitability or better profitability out of this, it really would go to enhance. We'd hope that the profitability could be applied to, our intention certainly would be to enhance our capacities, because we really want to push for our aspiration of one African, one vaccine. I would say, somebody asked, I think in this question, how much more would it cost? It cost us a lot to get the setup. So it's a big footprint. You build a house and now you just add to the rooms. Countries with the capability to make vaccines. I don't think I think in the long term, Africa too needs to look at broader capacity, a broader reach. And so we'd like to work with some of the other people on the continent to create that. And also to be able to apply funding to invest in a pipeline, in a vaccine pipeline. And of course, we would look to make sure that pipeline had a real focus.
Directed to yourself, Strive. Can you speak with respect to the requirement for African volumes? What do you anticipate these volumes will look like in the foreseeable future? Strive, you're on mute, if you can unmute.
So that is 900 million people. If we use a double dose type vaccine, we need 1.8 billion. If we use a vaccine like the Johnson & Johnson, which by the way is the favored vaccine amongst the African countries, they've made sure. So we need, our own mission is to deliver at least 50% of our requirement, which is 450 million people. So we've ordered 400 million, some of which we will now sit down with you to discuss the final orders and set by WHO. Between AVAT and COVAX, we work very closely together because it's a 50-50 deal. And we've already asked COVAX that now that Aspen is producing under license, they must also place orders with Aspen. And we're asking them to join us because we act on their guidelines. They will give us guidelines on the annual booster. But you all know from public media that you're going to have at least a boost once a year. That seems to be the emerging consensus. So for those of you who are from the business world and are trying to calculate what our demand is for some of the other promises to manufacture in Africa become concrete. This is our default vaccine because it's produced, it's got an African name. Stephen, please lower your head so that the world can see. Step away, please. That is called Aspanovax, Dr. Mwete. Have you seen anything more beautiful in your life? Aspen back, Aspen over. A bit of our embarrassment away because everybody said we couldn't do it. You see, we can produce it, Dr. Mweti. Go tell Dr. Tedros that all the orders now must begin with Aspinovax until we get another one.
And those should donate African vaccines.
So
African vaccines should be donated to Africans.
yes, African vaccines.
Dr. Moeti, would you like to add a comment? In fact, I was going to direct the final question. I realize we have run over time and we need to end this press briefing. But would you like to offer a final comment? There was a question directed at yourself and Dr. Ngozi. What does
moment, I think it'll make a huge difference. What then will consolidate it? It's part of what Strive was saying a moment ago. So it needs on the other side the demand. The demand is certainly there, and it needs to be structured and organized, financed, and scheduled in such a way that it benefits from this really huge opportunity and what it offers as well in transformative moment. And you know, as I've said before, based on previous experience, African countries are waiting for this. And I think the experience with the financing from the Afrexim Bank, with the African Unions forming a framework for this, is also a very good experience. I'm sure we've learned what it takes to put the resources together to make this manageable, predictable, and growing, because there's no doubt it's huge. There's work to do to improve the capacity to absorb and to use on time. And I think it's a very good predictor for the future if we take this moment for what it represents and look at the history behind where this has come from. I think where there have been attempts that have not quite gelled in the way that this is looking like doing.
Management of Aspen Pharmacare. We thank firstly our panelists, our participants, and of course our colleagues from the media who have also played an important role during this pandemic, and it's a much appreciated role. Today is a historic moment. It's the moment where Africa has its own COVID vaccine. Strive, as you said, P magnitude from the continent. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Great.